Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these super cute beaded rose rings. That is actually a continuous ring band all the way around with no obvious start or finish. Now they also perfectly match a previous bracelet that I made, so you can make a super adorable set. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description box down below for that tutorial. But of course this ring is equally lovely on its own, and it's actually also pretty quick and easy to make. Now if you want to support me in any way, you can of course always like, share and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future videos. That is always appreciated. You can also become a member of my YouTube channel or Patreon, where you can get things like early access, exclusive content and more. You can find all that information in the description box as well. And I also want to mention, if you ever make anything from any of my tutorials and you want to share, you can of course share on all the socials, but I also have the community channel open on my channel, where you can post pictures of your pieces, sharing them with me and each other of course. So if you ever want to share anything, please feel free to do it there. I'd love to see it, and I'm sure everyone else would as well. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make these super adorable rings, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now the wire I'm using is a regular round silver coated copper wire, and the gauge is a 0.6mm. And this is the only one we're going to use throughout, along with our beads of course. And I'm using these 2-hole RounDuos in this lovely blue colour. And these beads have 2 holes going through them next to each other in the same direction, which we're going to be utilizing for this design. As for the tools, first of all we need some flush cutters so we can of course cut the wire, tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, round nose pliers for the little loops we need to make, and then I recommend nylon jaw pliers to help avoid tool marks, and finally a ring mandrel to help get the right size and shape that we need. Then the length of wire that we need to cut is a length of about 1 meter here, and just make sure there's no obvious kinks or bends in it. Now I'm also going to just use a piece of scrap wire here. This is just to help size the ring, so just whatever you have handy. And we're going to start off with this because I'm then going to take my ring mandrel, and we just want to figure out what size we want for the ring. So once you know that, we can then take the scrap wire. Now one end I want to put on that size, hold on to it, and then just shape it around all the way to the point where it meets back up with itself. And I can then remove the ring mandrel. I'm just going to put a bend into that point, and it doesn't have to be exactly precise, so don't worry too much about it. It's just more of a guide, and then we can straighten it back out. And I now have this guide to help me as I'm making the ring, so we know when to stop and don't make it too long or too short. So I'm just going to make sure to have this handy. Otherwise, I'm then going to grab my length of wire that we cut ready, and I want to actually find the midpoint of this, so I'm just going to put the 2 ends together and then just bring the wire further down to where the midpoint is, and we're going to have basically a little loop. I'm then going to grab my round nose pliers because we actually want to make a loop initially here. So on approximate that midpoint, again it doesn't have to be precise. And I'm just going to go towards the tip of my round nose pliers so the loop doesn't get too big. And we just want to cross the wires and basically fully complete the loop around the pliers here, just so we end up with a little loop, which is our starting point then. Now from here, we're then going to straight away start off making our very first rows. And I'm going to just still keep using my round nose pliers just because it makes it a little bit easier. Otherwise there's not really anything to hold on to right now. So I'm just going to put them back through the loop so we actually have something to hold on to. And then to make the first rows, we have our wires crossing each other there, but they're crossing next to each other. So basically they've kind of started off a twist, and we want to continue that twist. So just make sure you twist them in the correct direction. In this case, I need to twist them clockwise, but it doesn't matter which way you do twist them as long as you're making them twist together, kind of fasten them in place. And you just want to do a little bit of a twist here initially, and what this is going to be is actually the center of our first rows. Now once you have that nicely in place, I'm then going to start making the rest of the rows by basically having one wire chasing the other and then swapping whichever wire is the front one. So I'm just going to take this one here and then bring it further towards the other one without moving the other one with it. And then I'm going to just bring it underneath that other one and further around a little bit further like that. So this is now the new front one. And then I'm going to go back and take the new back one, basically chase that new front one, and then bring it underneath, and then that's the new front one. And you can adjust everything as you go to make sure you're happy with how it looks. And then that's the new front one. The new back one then wants to chase that, come underneath and become the new front one. And we're going to keep doing this and making sure we kind of basically create a spiral in here where the wires are twisting together along the way. That is what we are achieving. And it's those twists that end up making it look like the petals of the rose. So basically you want to do this, making sure the flower grows in size. So we want to make sure that the twist here is growing outwards. So we keep making sure it's next to itself, not coming underneath or on top of itself. So it grows in size, like I said. And it's up to you how you want yours to look and how large you want them to be. You can aim to make them about the same size throughout. You can also alternate the sizes. That would be really cute as well. But I'm going to aim for mine to be quite similar in size to the beads. So that is actually starting to get a little bit bigger. So I think I'm going to pretty much keep the size here. And then I'm going to start to bring my wire underneath the rose, because we are done kind of making the rose itself and the size of it. And then from here I'm just going to remove my round nose pliers. And this is, like I said, the starting point. We then need to get these wires into position so we can first of all add our first bead, but also then continue. So I'm just going to flatten it a little bit. Like I said, I want to make sure I don't really have any of the spiral here crossing over or under itself. And this is where you can also use your nylon jaw pliers for that, to avoid getting as many tool marks as possible. So from here, I just want to bring the wires a little bit further around, but underneath the rose. So basically this part now gets hidden underneath, and just bring them into position where we then want to add our first bead. So I'm going to grab my tweezer nose pliers, and as you can see, these wires are kind of wanting to go a little bit out to the side. We want to fix that by placing the pliers on the wire where it's still underneath the rose, but then putting a bend into it so it more comes straight out from the flower like that. And you can do it with both of them if you need to. Just basically adjust the positioning. And also we want to try and get them in the distance from each other that the holes in the beads are as well. So just approximately. So obviously once we add the bead, which is what we do next, it's going to fit nicely. So to do that, obviously grab your first bead, get all the way to the end of your wires, and then you want to just put one wire through one hole and the other wire through the other hole, and gently bring it down further and further to sit right next to the first rose here. And we're going to keep going like this, alternating between a rose bead, until obviously we have the length that we need, which is where the little tool that we made with the scrap wire comes in. I'm having that handy. We don't need it just yet because obviously this is nowhere near long enough. But to make the next rose, we're going to start a twist again, and I want to make sure I start at the center of that rose a little bit away from the bead, so the rose is going to end up sitting nicely placed next to the bead and not overlap it or too far away, so there's a gap, for instance. So you basically want to judge that depending on how large you want your rose to be as well. So basically where the center of the rose is where we want these two wires to now start crossing, because you start making the rose from the center, working your way out. And what I personally like to do as well is alternate the way I twist my wires. So for instance, the first one I twisted where, with how I'm holding these, the bottom wire will come over the other one and the top one comes under. I just like doing it so I vary how I make that twist throughout, just to make it a little bit more organic and unique. So I'm just going to do it the opposite way now. And I like to put my fingers on the bead and basically on the wire kind of to the point where I want that twist to start. So you can see where they cross over is where the center more or less of the rose is going to be. You can still adjust it a little bit, so don't worry too much about it. Now cross the wires and they are ready to get twisted. So I'm just going to start twisting them together here. So they first of all will stay in place, but then also creating this center of the rose. So once they are twisted, we are going to start the process of one of the wires chasing the other one, going underneath, becoming the new front one, and then the new back one is going to chase the new front one, cross underneath and become the new front one. And just like before, you want to keep going, building the rose in size outward, so our twist here and spiral ultimately will grow in size so it lays flat next to itself rather than overlapping or underlapping itself. So keep bringing the back one towards and underneath the front one. And also, as you can see, in this case we are making this rose kind of sitting flat on the end, so it doesn't really fit or match yet, but don't worry about that. This is just the easier way to create it, I find. And you can move, rotate your piece here as you're making the rose, rather than having these wires flop around too much and maybe poking you in the eye. So I think we are getting there in the size, something like that. I think it's pretty good. Then I just have a look to see what's the front. So this is the front because that's the top of the other rose, the first one. So that means I need to bring these wires to this side going away to then prepare them to add the next bead. So I'm just bringing them around, but now underneath the rose because I'm done making the rose itself. So I'm just roughly getting these wires in position now. And then what we need to do is basically flatten this rose down to sit flat next to the bead there, which is why we then made sure to start the twist a bit away from the bead, so that when you hold on to everything and then push the bead flat, so just kind of flip it down there, you can see it's going to fit in perfectly next to the bead. And we then have rose, bead, rose, and the wires are more or less in position. If you need to adjust anything, you can take your pliers and just put a little bend where you need to adjust the positioning. Also, smooth out your wires at any point to avoid any kinks or bends, especially then before adding the bead, so we don't end up stripping the wire while we're adding the bead. But then we can go to the ends of the wire, grab our next bead, put one wire through one hole, the other wire through the other hole. As you can see, the holes in the bead running through the bead next to each other like this, and then just gently bring it down to sit next to the rose that we just made. And basically you want to keep going like this for the length that you need. So it's up to you, like I said, how you want to make yours. Here I'm then going to make sure to make the next twist in the opposite direction to the one I just made. Like, it doesn't really matter, but it's just what I personally prefer to do. Which means I'm going to bring the bottom one over and the top one under, and then continue to twist them together to kind of secure the center part of the rose in place here. And then just go straight into building the rose from that center point. So have one chase the other one, come underneath, and then start to create the spiral while the wires are then twisting together, creating the effect of the petals until you reach the size that you want. Like I said, I'm making mine roughly the same size as each other and as the beads. So just continue around. I think I'm pretty much there. So I'm just going to bring them now underneath the rose and come all the way around here to get them in the direction that they need to go to add the next bead, because when I put it flat I can see that this is going to be flattened in that direction, so the wires are going to end up sticking out in that way. So for now just leave them there and then flatten that rose down to sit next to the previous bead. So it looks a little something like this. And then of course you can just adjust these wires here. So I want to just, instead of having this coming basically out to the side, I want it to come upwards and away from the end in a distance from the other one that fits more or less nicely with the space between the holes in the bead. And we can then add our next bead. So just one wire through each of the holes and then gently bring it down to sit right next to the rose that we just made. And you just continue like this until I'm going to carry on until I have about the length of the little measuring tool that we made here when we put it around the ring mandrel. So just get as close to that as possible. So now I have my length here. I've just ended up with 6 roses and 6 beads. And if I just compare to my little measuring tool, it is more or less that length. So it doesn't have to be precise, because what you'll find is that when we shaped this length of wire around the ring mandrel, obviously this is just a thin little length of wire. When you then shape this around the ring mandrel, it will end up basically not fitting the same size on the ring mandrel if you want to put these two ends together, even though it's pretty much the same length. And that's because of the thickness of this. This is obviously thicker than this length of wire. So we were just using that as kind of a guide. What I'm going to do now is shape this so we know kind of where we're at. So just either push that bead down and hold it there, or you can take it off and add it again after. I'm just going to remove it so it doesn't fall off. And then just start on the size that you measured with that measuring tool, and then you want to start shaping this. So of course put the back on the side against the ring mandrel, and then start to gently shape this around all the way until the whole length that we've created so far is shaped. It doesn't have to be perfect, just get it into a rough shape here. And then you can see that the two ends even with, if I then re-add the bead, and bring it all the way down there, put it back on the mandrel, get that size if I can find it, there we go. The two ends won't meet up, and that's because of the thickness of this compared to the thickness of just that wire that we used. So now that we have this in place, we can see we have that gap there, which we then still just need to fill in with some more roses and beads, but we at least have a good idea. So this looks like basically we'll need another rose and another bead, because we do want to end with the opposite to what we started. So I started with a rose, so I want to end with a bead so we can kind of get that continuous look all the way around. So I think adding one more rose and one more bead will end up fitting just perfectly. So you can just remove it, and as you can see it kind of springs open. Don't worry about that. Just continue from where we are. So I added a bead there. I want to make the next rose. So we do that in the exact same way. You don't have to straighten this back out, just leave it the way it is. And make your next rose like I showed you before. Get that twist in place, making sure the bead is pushed all the way down. So the very center is started, and then we can start the wires chasing each other to create that spiral. So we end up with our little rose. So just build this in the exact same way, and I'm almost there I think with the size. Make sure the spiral is nice and flat. So again, if you need to, you can always use pliers to help flatten it out until we get to the point where we're happy with the size, and then we can purposely bring our wires underneath the rose so we can bring them out in the correct direction here, because we still need them to then sit in that direction so we can add our bead. And then just flatten this down so it ends up sitting next to that final bead that we just added before. And like I said, I feel that it would fit perfectly with another rose which we just made. I'm just going to bring these wires into position, but then also with another bead, which is what we need anyway, so we don't have two roses. Of course you could do that if it doesn't bother you, but if you want to do the same so it finishes in that continuous design, just want to add that bead, bring it all the way down, and then you can see as we're bringing the ends together, we're going to have the continuous look all the way around of alternating between rose bead, rose bead. And obviously we basically just now need to finish this off. We can just of course double check to make sure, so find the size and then just bring the ends together, and that is going to fit nicely, close enough anyway, because if you add more like another rose and bead, of course that would add quite a bit more length to it. So just get as close to the size as you can. And from here, the way I like to finish this off is, if you remember when we started making the first rose, we started with our round nose pliers towards the tip and basically created a little loop, which if we can just identify that, we can use to bring these ends of wire through. So on the underside of the rose here, the wire that's more towards, in this case, the right with how I'm looking at it, just bring that through the loop, going from right to left, if you have it sitting pretty sideways here, like I do, and then just pull it out to the other side. Don't have to do it all the way tight yet because it helps to have a little bit of space to then also bring the other through, and I just like to then bring that through in the opposite direction. So this is more, obviously I've just turned it, but it's coming from the other side, and then I'm going to put it through opposite to the one I brought through first. So they're basically crossing inside of that loop. And again, you just pull that as well. And then once they are both through, we can start to pull them nice and tight and basically close up this space we have between the two ends and pull them closer and closer together. Of course, make sure that final bead is pushed as far down against the final rose as possible, so we don't have too much of any gaps showing if we can help it. And I think that is pretty much sitting nicely now. So once we finish off the ends, it's going to end up looking just continuous all the way around, and you're not going to be able to see where it starts and where it ends. So to finish off the ends of the wire, I like to just bring it through. Now if your loop is large enough to basically bring your lengths of wire through again, that's what I prefer to do. So basically just one side at a time, bring the length through the ring band and then through that same loop if you've got space. You can always use pliers to help guide your wire more. You can get a bit of grip and be more precise about it. And then on the other side it's coming out. Just grab that and start to pull it through. And then I just like to make sure as I'm pulling it through here to get it nice and tight, to just hold against the wire so it doesn't pull loose on the other side. And we end up with it wrapping around the initial loop that we made nice and tight. And if there's enough space, I like to do the same with the other length as well, so we secure them nicely in place, because obviously we don't want anything to come undone or open up at any point. And again, pushing that through and then just grabbing the end, and again I like to hold against the wire so it gets nice and tight around there as I'm pulling it through. And basically they are nicely attached now. Now I like to just bring them around again as if I was going to wrap through another time, except instead of doing that we are going to finish them off because there isn't really any more space to feed them through anyway. So I'm just going to get my cutters and cut off the excess, just leaving a short little end that we can then make sure to just push in with our pliers and get that end of the wire out of the way. So make sure you don't feel it on the inside of the ring band, because obviously that will be irritating and could scratch on your skin as you're wearing it. Just do the same thing with the other one as well. And find where it wraps around and then just cut off the excess. Make sure to just tuck in the end like that. And as you can see, it might have deformed a little bit while we're working with it, and it's quite nice and flexible though, so we can easily reshape it. So we can put it back on the ring mandrel and just bring it to the size that it is, so it's reshaping nicely. And as well, the last thing you can do if you feel the need to, just go in and do any final kind of little flattenings of any of the roses all the way around if you want to, just to settle everything in place. And then otherwise your super cute ring is finished and ready to wear. And it's a nice and easy continuous ring band with no obvious start or finish to it. It's quick and easy to make, and of course matches the previous bracelets absolutely wonderfully as well. So don't forget, make sure to check those out if you want to make a set, for instance. I'll have them linked in the description box down below. And feel free to check out my channel where you can subscribe and not miss any future tutorials and other content. Otherwise, I really hope you like this cute little ring. Thank you so much for watching the tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.